A major and dangerous shift in the weather pattern is locking into place right now, and it will unleash a siege of severe weather lasting at least 4 straight days. It all begins today across the southern plains, from central Texas into southern Kansas, where numerous severe storms will bring the threat of significant damaging winds, hail bigger than golf balls, and a few tornadoes. But the situation is going to become much more serious from there. As we head into tomorrow, Friday, and even Saturday, this stubborn pattern will bring repeated rounds of violent thunderstorms to the same areas, leading to a widespread outbreak of severe weather with intense tornadoes, destructive wind gusts, and very large hail. And believe it or not, the biggest threat from this pattern might not even be the storms themselves, but the water they bring. Some areas could see over a foot of rain in just a 48-hour period, creating a life-threatening flash flood emergency. The weather is about to turn incredibly volatile, so let's get right into the details. This is a very complex and concerning setup we're looking at. Let me know in the comments below where you're watching from and what you're seeing with your weather. Your on-the-ground reports are incredibly helpful for all of us. And make sure you have your alerts turned on, because things are going to get active fast. And we have a ton of hazards to break down with this developing situation. And I want to begin with the big picture, the why behind this dangerous shift. What we're seeing is the development of what we call a blocking pattern, specifically a strengthening omega block. And it gets its name because the jet stream, that river of fast-moving air high up in the atmosphere, is contorting into a shape that looks like the Greek letter omega. We have a huge ridge of high pressure building over the Rocky Mountains, flanked by 2 deep troughs of low pressure, one over the west coast and one digging into the central United States. Now, when this pattern gets established, it essentially acts like a massive atmospheric dam. It stops the normal west-to-east progression of weather systems in its tracks, and that's exactly what's about to happen. A potent low-pressure system is going to get trapped in the central U.S., unable to move on. So instead of a storm system passing through in 12 or 24 hours, this one is going to sit and spin over the same general region for days on end. And that is the absolute recipe for a prolonged, high-impact weather event. It allows moisture to just continuously stream into the same area, like a fire hose aimed at the plains in the Mississippi Valley. And every single day, that accumulated moisture and energy gets unleashed in the form of explosive thunderstorms. Historically, these omega blocks are responsible for some of our most memorable and destructive weather events, especially major floods like the Great Flood of 1993, where a similar stubborn pattern led to catastrophic flooding for months. So when we see a pattern like this locking in during the peak of severe weather season, it gets our attention in a very serious way. Now let's break down the day-by-day risks from the Storm Prediction Center. And we'll start with today, which is Wednesday. We already have a slight risk of severe weather. That's a level 2 out of 5. Covering a large area from north-central Texas, spanning most of Oklahoma, and clipping the southern edge of Kansas. This includes major cities like Oklahoma City, Fort Worth, and Wichita. We also have a broader marginal risk, a level 1 out of 5, stretching all the way to the Mexican border and eastward toward the Arc Latex. Now, the main concerns for today are going to be scattered damaging wind gusts, potentially over 70 miles per hour, and large hail. A lot of that hail could easily reach the size of golf balls or even hen eggs in the strongest storms. And there is also a tornado threat. While it's not the highest risk we'll see this week, an isolated tornado or two is definitely on the table, especially with any storms that can remain discreet and tap into that low-level spin this evening. The environment today is primed for storms. We have a dry line setting up in West Texas, which is a classic trigger mechanism. To the east of that dry line, we have incredibly moist air surging northward from the Gulf of Mexico, with dew points climbing into the upper 60s and even low 70s. That's pure storm fuel. And when you combine that with steep lapse rates, meaning the temperature cools very quickly with height, you get an explosive amount of instability. So any storm that fires up today will have no trouble becoming severe very, very quickly. I'm most concerned about an area right along the Red River this evening, where I think the best combination of ingredients will overlap for all hazards. And as we head into Thursday, the situation gets substantially more dangerous. The omega block becomes fully established, and then that low-pressure system really starts to deepen. The Storm Prediction Center has already issued an enhanced risk for severe weather, a level 3 out of 5, centered on parts of North Texas, southeastern Oklahoma, and southwestern Arkansas. This area includes places like Dallas, Texarkana, and south of Oklahoma City. The slight risk area is massive, encompassing a huge corridor from central Texas all the way northeast into Missouri and Illinois. Now Thursday is the day where I am honestly pretty concerned about a significant tornado threat emerging. All the ingredients are coming together. We're going to have a very powerful low-level jet, a stream of fast winds just a few thousand feet off the ground, screaming in at over 50 knots. And when that interacts with the surface winds, it creates an immense amount of wind shear, or spin, in the atmosphere. So any supercell that forms in this environment will be rotating, and it will have the potential to produce strong, long-track tornadoes. The official outlook includes a 10% hatched tornado risk, which means there is a chance of EF2 or stronger tornadoes within that enhanced risk area. But I fully think that if certain conditions are met, that risk could be even higher. The hail threat is also very serious for Thursday. We're looking at a widespread risk of very large hail, likely baseball-sized or even larger in the most intense supercells. And widespread damaging winds are also a given. This has all the makings of a classic Southern Plains severe weather outbreak. We need to watch Thursday afternoon and evening extremely closely, but the danger does not stop there. And as we head into Friday, the threat evolves and in some ways becomes even more complex and hazardous. The threat area will shift slightly eastward, with the greatest concern likely focusing on the Arc-La-Tex region, northern Louisiana, Mississippi, and western Tennessee. An enhanced risk is again in place, and I would not be surprised at all if a portion of this area is upgraded to a moderate risk, a level 4 out of 5 in subsequent outlooks. Friday is what I'm calling the dual threat day. We will still have a very significant severe weather threat, with all modes of severe weather on the table, including the potential for strong tornadoes. The wind shear remains incredibly high, and the instability will be off the charts. But the big game changer on Friday is the flooding. By this point, the ground across this entire region will be completely saturated from the storms on Wednesday and Thursday. It will be like a full sponge that can't absorb another drop. And then we're going to see a plume of tropical moisture with precipitable water values. That's a measure of how much water is in the atmosphere, that are literally at record levels for this time of year. So we're expecting training thunderstorms, which is where storm after storm moves over the same exact location for hours on end. And this will lead to simply staggering rainfall totals. Widespread amounts of 4 to 8 inches are likely, but isolated areas caught under these training bands could see 10, 12, or even 15 inches of rain. This will create a life-threatening flash flood situation. And believe it or not, this could become a more widespread and deadly threat than the tornadoes themselves. We could see creeks and rivers rapidly rise out of their banks, roads become impassable, and homes and businesses inundated. Friday is a day that you have to be prepared for multiple simultaneous weather hazards. And then, looking at the weekend, the pattern finally begins to show signs of breaking down, but the threat is far from over. On Saturday, that low-pressure system will begin to slowly eject to the northeast. But as it does, it will drag a long cold front all the way from the Great Lakes down to the Gulf Coast. And all along that front, we expect a very long line of severe thunderstorms to develop. So we have another slight risk of severe weather covering a huge area from Louisiana and Mississippi all the way up through the Tennessee and Ohio valleys. The primary threat on Saturday will likely transition to widespread damaging winds as these storms congeal into a massive line, what we call a QLCS, or quasi-linear convective system. These lines can produce swaths of wind damage over hundreds of miles, and they are also notorious for producing brief, spin-up tornadoes that can be very difficult to see and get warnings out for. So if you're in places like Nashville, Birmingham, or Memphis on Saturday, you need to be ready for a very windy and stormy day. The heavy rain threat will also continue to shift east, bringing the risk of flooding to the deep south and southeast. By Sunday, the main system will finally be pulling away into the northeast, and the overall severe threat should diminish. However, some lingering instability could still support isolated severe storms along the East Coast. The bigger story by late in the weekend will be the widespread river flooding that will likely be ongoing in the wake of this incredibly wet and violent multi-day event. So let's go way more in detail now, really dig into the meteorology of why I am so concerned about the tornado potential, particularly for Thursday, and then we will break down the catastrophic flooding threat for Friday. This is where we need to look at the atmospheric parameters. For Thursday, when we look at the forecast soundings, which are basically a vertical snapshot of the atmosphere, the picture they paint is alarming. We're forecasting CAPE, or convective available potential energy, values to exceed 3,000 to 4,000 joules per kilogram. In simple terms, that is a tremendous amount of storm fuel, an explosive amount of instability. But instability alone doesn't make tornadoes. You need wind shear. And the wind shear on Thursday is what really stands out. The forecast hotographs, which are diagrams that show how the wind changes with height, are showing that classic sickle shape that we look for on big tornado days. This indicates strong veering of the winds, meaning they turn clockwise as you go up, from a southeasterly direction at the surface to a southwesterly and then westerly direction in the mid and upper levels. This creates powerful horizontal rotation in the atmosphere. When a thunderstorm's updraft ingests that rotation, it tilts it into the vertical, and you get a rotating supercell. The storm relative helicity, or SRH values, are forecast to be in the 300 to 500 meters squared per second squared range. Anything over 250 is very significant and supportive of strong tornadoes. So we have all the ingredients: massive instability, incredible wind shear, and a powerful trigger in the form of a dry line and cold front. The big question mark, though, for Thursday will be the capping inversion. A cap is a layer of warm air aloft that can act as a lid on the atmosphere, preventing storms from forming. If the cap is too strong, storms can't break through and the day can be a bust. However, a moderate cap can be a good thing for a major severe weather event. It allows all that instability to build up underneath it during the day, like pressure in a cooker. And once that cap finally erodes or breaks in the late afternoon, all that energy is released at once, leading to isolated, discrete supercells instead of a messy cluster of storms. And discrete supercells are the most prolific tornado producers. Right now, the model suggests the cap will be just strong enough to hold for most of the day, but it should break between 3 and 5 p.m. across North Texas and southern Oklahoma. If that happens exactly as forecast, we are in for a very dangerous evening. Any storm that erupts in that environment will have a high probability of becoming a tornadic supercell. Now let's talk more about the flooding threat for Friday, because I cannot overstate how serious this is going to be. As I mentioned, the precipitable water, or PWAT, values are going to be in rare territory. Yeah, we're talking values of 2 to 2.5 inches, and to put that in perspective, the maximum possible value is around 3 inches. So the atmosphere will be absolutely saturated, juiced with tropical moisture straight from the Gulf of Mexico. The problem is that this plume of moisture is going to run up against a stalled frontal boundary right over the Arc Latex and Mississippi Valley. That boundary acts as a ramp, forcing all that moist air to rise, cool, and condense into rain. And because the Omega Block is holding this entire system in place, that boundary isn't going to move. So we will see what's called axis of training convection. Imagine a railroad track. One rail car, or thunderstorm, moves down the track, and it's followed by another, and another, and another, all over the same spot. This can go on for 6, 8, even 12 hours in some cases. When this happens, rainfall rates inside these storms could be 2 to 4 inches per hour. It doesn't take a mathematician to figure out that if you get that for several hours, you will have catastrophic rainfall totals. We are looking at model projections showing bullseyes of over 15 inches of rain, particularly in parts of northern Louisiana and central Mississippi. This isn't just nuisance street flooding. This is the kind of flooding that washes out roads and bridges, that forces entire towns to evacuate. Rivers like the Pearl River, the Yazoo River, and the Ouachita River are going to respond very, very quickly to this runoff. We will likely see multiple river gauges shoot into major flood stage in a very short amount of time. If you live in a flood-prone area anywhere from eastern Texas to western Tennessee, Friday is the day you need to have a plan in place. You need to know your evacuation route and have multiple ways to receive flash flood warnings, which can be issued with very little lead time. And remember, never, ever drive through a flooded roadway. Turn around, don't drown. It only takes a few inches of moving water to sweep a car off the road. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the timing. Let's walk through how this is all going to unfold, starting with today. For today, Wednesday, things will be quiet for most of the morning and early afternoon, but by about 3 to 4 p.m., we will be watching for the first thunderstorms to erupt along that dry line in West Texas and western Oklahoma. These initial storms will likely be isolated and will have the potential to become supercells very quickly, posing a threat for very large hail, and perhaps up to the size of baseballs and damaging winds. By about 6 to 7 p.m., as the sun begins to set, the low-level jet will start to ramp up. And this is when our tornado threat will start to increase, especially for any storms that can stay by themselves. I'm worried about the area near the Red River, from just west of Wichita Falls over toward Ardmore, Oklahoma. This is the area to watch for a possible tornado between 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. As we head deeper into the evening, from 8 p.m. onward, these storms are going to grow and merge into one or more clusters, forming a large line of thunderstorms. This line will then surge eastward across Oklahoma and North Texas through the late evening and overnight hours. It will be knocking on the doorstep of Oklahoma City and the DFW Metroplex between about 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. The main threat with this line will be widespread, significant damaging winds, with gusts potentially between 60 and 80 miles per hour, along with hail and an ongoing threat of brief, spin-up tornadoes embedded within the line. So this will be a nocturnal event for many, which is always more dangerous. You have to have a way to be woken up for a warning tonight. And then we get to Thursday. The morning may actually start off with some leftover showers and non-severe storms from Wednesday night's activity, especially over Arkansas and Missouri. This morning convection is a huge question mark. If it's too widespread and hangs around too long, it can contaminate the air mass and limit the instability for the afternoon, which would reduce the overall severe threat. But right now, the thinking is that this activity will move out, and we will see several hours of sunshine across Texas and Oklahoma, which will allow the atmosphere to destabilize and become extremely volatile. The cap should start to break between 3 and 5 p.m., likely starting in north-central Texas, maybe near the DFW area, and just south of the Red River in Oklahoma. Once that happens, expect explosive thunderstorm development. We will go from clear skies to powerful discrete supercells in less than an hour, and any storm that forms in this environment from 4 p.m. through about 9 p.m. will be a candidate to produce a strong, potentially long-track tornado along with giant hail. This is the window of greatest concern. Cities like Dallas, Sherman, Durant, and Paris, Texas are in the heart of this threat zone. As we go through the evening, these supercells will track northeastward into southeastern Oklahoma and southwestern Arkansas. They will likely maintain their intensity well after dark, leading to a very dangerous nocturnal tornado threat. Eventually, these storms will likely merge into another intense line, which will then sweep across Arkansas and Louisiana overnight Thursday into Friday morning, carrying a threat of widespread damaging winds. And that brings us to Friday, the dual threat day. The morning will likely be very active, with that line of storms from Thursday night continuing to move through Louisiana and Mississippi, producing damaging winds and heavy rain. But the real concern begins Friday afternoon. A stalled frontal boundary is expected to set up somewhere from northeast Texas across northern Louisiana and into central Mississippi. To the south of that boundary, the air will be incredibly moist and unstable. We expect new rounds of thunderstorms to fire up along and just south of this boundary, starting around 1 to 2 p.m. And because the winds in the atmosphere will be parallel to this front, the storms will train. They will move over the same areas again and again. This is when the catastrophic flash flooding threat will begin. From Friday afternoon through Friday night and even into early Saturday morning, areas in this corridor could see relentless torrential rainfall. At the same time, any storms that can become more cellular or discrete within this mess will still pose a significant severe weather threat. The shear is still more than sufficient for rotating storms, so we could see supercells embedded within the heavy rain, capable of producing tornadoes. A tornado that is wrapped in rain is especially dangerous because it's nearly impossible to see. This is a very complicated and high-stakes forecast for Friday. It's not just about one hazard, it's about the compounding impact of multiple hazards at once. If you are in this risk area on Friday, you need to be on high alert all day and all night. Finally, for Saturday, the pattern lifts northeast. That long line of thunderstorms, or QLCS, will likely be ongoing Saturday morning from the central Gulf Coast up into the Tennessee Valley. It will continue to press eastward throughout the day. The main concern will be widespread damaging straight-line winds as this line moves through places like Alabama, Georgia, and Tennessee during the day on Saturday. There will also be a continued risk for brief rain-wrapped tornadoes within that line. The forward speed of the line should pick up, which will hopefully limit the overall flash flood threat compared to Friday. But given how saturated the ground will be, even an inch or two of rain could cause problems. By Saturday night, the line should be approaching the Appalachian Mountains and beginning to weaken. And by Sunday, the system is finally out of here for most, with just some lingering showers and maybe an isolated storm along the Atlantic coast. But the aftermath, in the form of major river flooding, will likely continue for many days after the rain has stopped. We will be watching those river forecasts very closely well into next week, so this is a very serious multi-day severe weather and flooding event that is about to unfold. The key takeaways are these. Today is about scattered severe storms with large hail and damaging winds in the southern plains. Thursday is a very concerning day for a potential outbreak of strong tornadoes and giant hail centered on North Texas and southeastern Oklahoma. And Friday is the extremely dangerous dual threat day. with both significant severe weather and the potential for catastrophic, life-threatening flooding in the Ark Latex and Mississippi Valley. And the threat of damaging winds and some tornadoes continues for the southeast on Saturday. Everyone in these risk areas needs to be prepared. Make sure you have multiple reliable ways to receive weather alerts. A NOAA weather radio is the gold standard. Have apps on your phone, but don't rely on them alone. Know your safe place for a tornado warning. The lowest floor of your home, in an interior room, away from windows, and have a plan for what you will do if a flash flood warning is issued for your area. This pattern is a stark reminder of how quickly the atmosphere can shift into a dangerous gear. We've gone from a relatively quiet period to what will likely be one of the most impactful severe weather events of the year so far, all in the span of a few days. We're going to be covering this all week long, so make sure you are subscribed to the channel and have those notifications turned on. If you found this forecast helpful, hitting that like button really helps us out. We will be going live to track these storms, especially on Thursday and Friday, to bring you the latest information and keep you safe. So please, stay weather aware over the next several days. Look out for each other and have a plan.